Hi, hello, and welcome to Shankar IAS Academy's daily current affairs analysis. And today's date is 6th of February 2026. And please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit on the bell icon if you want to receive instant updates on all the news and new updates that we do. With that, let's move into the topics of discussion. The first is about the political polarization and transparency, and it talks about how India should not be a mystery. And the second is about how Supreme Court warns big data tech companies about consent and data sharing. The next is about India's creative orange economy and how the Union Budget 2026 is something that is novel for the Gen Z. Next is about the deterioration in India Bangladesh relations and if Bangladesh is the new Pakistan. And the fifth is the prelims focus for the day. So the next topic of the day is by Abhijit Banerjee, a leading economist, and he's told that India is going to become a mystery. And then the polarized climate is also contributing to it. So why is this significant and why is it important in the UPSC perspective is what we are going to be seeing. So the first point is that the Nobel laureate, he is a Nobel laureate in economics, and he's told that there is a lot of political polarization, that is the ideological divide that is happening, and political parties are owning media houses, and the media freedom is getting affected. It is the fourth pillar of the nation. It should not be controlled by anybody. It should have a transparency. But then the third point, transparency in data institutions, that is, even the media houses get reports from data and institutions. If we say that the data that we get are coerced, then it is going to be very, very difficult. Now, all these three are in the Indian perspective. How is this central to investors? Because investors who are investing in India need to have confidence in our nation, and henceforth, transparency is very important. For Abhijit Banerjee, transparency is equal to investment, and the policy predictability, they will be able to invest only with the policy predictability and the credibility that India has worldwide. You can talk about headline GDP growth, but just headline GDP growth will not get you investments, and investments are very, very integral. The investors prioritize your stable policy regime, your institutional credibility as such. And that is why the constitutional legal framework, Article 19.1, the freedom of speech and expression is a long debate because media houses, do they need freedom of speech and expression? What about defamation? They walk on a thin ice. So Article 19.1a is very, very integral. The second is the Right to Information Act 2005. But then even in the Right to Information Act, we see that there is a lot of loopholes in the transparency that we talk about, and the CAG has a constitutional authority. The regulatory data institutions, we have four institutions that we're going to discuss about today. One is the RBI. It will publish about the monetary, banking, and the forex data. And the National Statistics Office will talk about the GDP, the inflation, and the employment records. SEBI will regulate the security market, and the Niti Aayog is a policy think tank. There are types of foreign investment. One is the foreign direct investment and the foreign portfolio investment. The foreign direct investment is something that is long term, it is stable. The foreign portfolio investment is something that is short term, it is hot pocket money, it is unstable. That is why we are talking about the rupee depreciation. The rupee depreciation is linked to capital going out, the capital outflow, the trade that has a deficit, and the global monetary tightening. All three options have a relation to the currency depreciation, which is why we have to talk about the indices which predict the currency depreciation, which predicts the media freedom, which predicts transparency. The first one is the World Press Freedom Index. When you talk about press freedom, if there is press freedom, then it is Reporters Without Borders. If it is governance indicator, then it's World Bank. If you see the word corruption, the opposite to that is transparency. So corruption perception index is Transparency International, and global competitiveness report is the World Economic Forum. The political polarization and economic impact. What is the political polarization? There is a deep ideological division. It will impact the policy continuity, the regulatory certainty, and the institutional independence. Why do investors care? Investors do care because they want a predictable taxation regime. They want honest reporting. They do not want people to keep changing their tax ideas. And they want a stable contract enforcement, and they want the country to have a rule of law. Now, the ease of doing business first was this was the report which was published by World Bank. Then this was replaced by Business Ready Report Framework. So this can be a prelims question, which the World Bank, which report did it discontinue in 2021? The Ease of Doing Business report, and it's replaced by the Business Ready report. Okay, now we come to the prelims practice question for the day. The Right to Information Act derives its constitutional basis from Article 19(1)(a). So the Right to Information Act 2005 derives its constitutional basis from Article 1(a). Foreign portfolio investment is generally more stable than foreign direct investment. It's the inverse. Foreign direct investment has more stability than foreign portfolio investment. The World Press Freedom Index is published by Reporters Without Borders. So we know that statement 2 and 3 are wrong. So anything that has 2 and 3 should be wrong. The answer should be 1 only. The answer is 1 only. With this, we come to the end of this topic for the day, and we are moving to the next topic. So today, this topic talks about the Supreme Court questioning a lot of big techs and data companies, and it is questioning about two things. One is about the consent, and two is about the data sharing between them. So this is why it talks about the digital literacy and the consent angle. So this is what today's topic is about. Let's dive into it. So the first point is the Supreme Court has issued a judicial ultimatum. What is it saying, and for who has it issued it? For who, the answer is it's issued to Meta and WhatsApp, because they're using a lot of data sharing policies and consent practices. And the consent is that it's like I'm giving you two options, or I'm asking you to choose one from this. Then it is fair because I'm giving you two options and I'm asking you to choose one. If I give this and I tell that choose one, how would it be? That's what WhatsApp and Meta are doing. Their consent policies are not genuinely voluntary. It is a form of coercion, is what is tried. So what is the background? See, in 2021, WhatsApp introduced a take it or leave it policy. It said that if you're not able to give consent, we are fine with it. If you want to be in WhatsApp, take a policy or leave it. But then the policy enabled a greater data sharing between WhatsApp and Meta. Why did it want the data? For advertising and business purposes. The users had no meaningful opt-out, because opting out of Meta or WhatsApp meant opting out of the society itself. So people were forced. In the Hindu in August 2022 had told that WhatsApp privacy policy places users in a take it or leave it situation. And the High Court noted that WhatsApp occupies a dominant position in the market for OTT messaging apps through smartphones in India. Today, how many of us get OTPs from a lot of platforms that we use, right from Netflix to Meesho to Myntra to whatever you get, your OTPs come on WhatsApp. And only a few platforms use normal messages for their OTP premises. And take daily commerce, Zepto, Blinkit, Instamap, Swiggy. If you give an option saying remind when this particular product is available with you, the message comes to you on WhatsApp. That's how integral WhatsApp has become. WhatsApp has become the new society. So the Competition Commission of India in 2021 gave a fine of 213.14 crore globally for WhatsApp, and it held Meta guilty, saying that you are misusing a dominant position, you are forcing people. It ordered a 5-year ban on WhatsApp uses data with Meta, and the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. It upheld the penalty and set aside 5-year data sharing ban. It said that for 5 years you are not allowed to share data and it is disproportionate. Now, the Supreme Court took up Meta's appeal. It raised the fundamental constitutional questions and economic questions that goes beyond the competitive law. Now, what happened? The judicial ultimatum came into accord. It said that the court's final warning to a party, it is a time-bound direction of the judiciary and it requires for an undertaking or assurance. And we will take serious action if the warning of penalties, dismissal or coercive actions is ignored and these warnings are not explicitly mentioned in the Indian Constitution. So, what is this consent versus coercion that we are talking about? The courts observe that in the monopolistic platforms, consent is not actually consent. Let's take example of our real lives, everyday lives. When we want to go to a research paper, immediately when we have cookies, accept term and condition, accept term and conditions. Do you really know what the term and condition is? Opting out of WhatsApp in India is comparable to opting out of the society because it has a strong network and the digital literacy gap, the transparency is not equal to understanding. Even with digitally literate people, they all take various ideas, they all take various notes, but then they fall prey to cookies. Large sections of Indian users, they are not able to comprehend what the privacy laws are stating, even though they are educated. Therefore, informed consent is questionable. The court referred that the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, it observed that the act focuses on two things that we're talking about. One is privacy, one is consent. Whenever we talk about privacy, we will remember the K. Puttasamy case. But now it is silent on the economic value of data because today data is money. When you go to a normal shop, you fill out your data. That data, when it is given to some third party, it is money. In today's date, it is an intangible asset that we are giving. So, henceforth, it is suggested that privacy protection alone may be insufficient in the digital economy. So, with this, we have come to the prelims practice question of the day. With reference to the term judicial ultimatum, consider the following statements. It's formally defined as a legal term under the Code of Civil Procedures Act 1908. No, it's not defined. It refers to the court issuing a time-bound conditional warning, failure of which may invite strict legal consequences. So, the second statement is right. So, the answer should be 2 only. Let's check. Yes, the answer is 2 only. With this, we have come to the end of this topic and let's move on to the next topic. So the topic we are going to discuss now is about the orange economy. The orange economy is something that is very, very relevant to the Gen Z and it's been booming during the Gen Z period. And the Union Budget 2026 for the first time has allocated a substantial amount of money for this particular orange economy. Let's get into the topic and understand what the orange economy is and how things have changed in the Union Budget. So the first point is the orange economy. What the orange economy is? Orange economy is nothing but a creative economy. It is known as the creative economy and it refers to ideas that are driven by culture and intellectual property. So what fields come under this? AVGC. What is this AVGC? The animation, the video creation, gaming and comics. 4 of this, the creative content, everything comes under this creative economy or the orange economy. So now the next question is, who gave this term orange economy? The term orange economy was given by Ivan Duque Marquez, the president of Colombia. Okay, so with this we are moving to the second slide. The second slide is about the sector valuation. How much does India's orange economy value? India's creative industry is valued at 3.01 lakh crore, that is approximately about $35 billion, with the media and entertainment sector alone at 2.5 lakh crore. So we have a creative hub that marks globalization. This is for the mains perspective that you can use. The second point is the creative exports. It earned over 94,677 crore, that is about $11 billion in 2023. We had a lot of creative exports that were happening. So why are these creative exports coming up only now? Why not in the previous generation? Because today we feel closer to the world more than ever. With the net gen that is coming up, we feel closer to the world, and the globalization aspect and the export and import, the need and the content creation, content consuming has made this creative export gain about $11 billion. The third one is the employment. It supports up to 8% of the national employment, and the economic share, that is, it contributes roughly around 20% to the India's gross value added. So now, according to the economic survey, because we have a high segment growth, what does the economic survey say? The economic survey says that specific verticals are showing momentum. That is, as I already stated, AVGC, animation, VFX, gaming and comics, it recorded over 20% growth in 2024. And also, if you take the case of comics, comics are also remade into movies. Take the case of Marvel. A lot of Marvel fans have come from the comics. And take the case of gaming. Today, we see that Netflix based games are on the rise. The VFX has become very common that when you go to any mall in your city, you will see VFX based gamings, and animated movies, animated comics, animated films are on the rise. So it is recorded over 20% growth in 2024. The revenue estimated is about 23,200 crore in 2024, and the revenue reached is about 10,300 crore in 2024. So these are some of the data that we see. Now with that, the creative economy projected to grow at an 18%. That is, first it had 1,900 crores. Then it became 3,400 crores by 2026. The live entertainment also has increased, and henceforth when the live entertainment increases, it has an effect on the tourism potential. Today, we see that there are a lot of live concerts. There are a lot of people who are handling book reading clubs. There are a lot of people who became famous by these gaming strategies. So people come from all over the world just for this tourism angle. Next, the AVGC sector is recognized as a core future services growth engine, and the AVGC content creator labs are to be set up in 15,000 schools and 500 colleges all over India. Why is this happening? Because today we see that a lot of Gen Z kids, even who are in school, who are in colleges, they are pursuing content creation. But is there a particular course dedicated for it? People take it as a career option. You get the YouTube silver button, the gold button, the platinum button, and you get revenue out of it. But is there a school for it? Is the question. So they have created content creator labs, and the implementation, they are going to start an Indian Institute of Creative Technologies. This is going to be started in Mumbai, and 250 crore rupees is allocated for the talent development. The workforce also will be aligned with 2 million professionals by 2030. That is their target amount, 250 million professionals. The Gen Z, again, Gen Z initiatives, what is focused towards the Gen Z? The first one is they want at least a minimum of 15,000 rupees up to 1 lakh rupees per month for the first time employees when they are doing their content creation ideas, and it should be paid at installments in 2 DBT installments at 6 and 12 months. The employer incentive should be 3,000 per month for 2 years, and they are planning to target about 2.1 crore youth. Startup recognition, that is, if they have a startup idea, with this money and with the education that they've got in the content creation labs, they will be able to start a deep tech startup, is what the orange economy of India is offering us. So again, overseas tour packages also is reduced by 2%, and foreign education remittance is also reduced by 2%. So now, why are we digital nomads is a question. You see, Korea has K-pop. We all know the K series, the K-pop. We know that America has Hollywood. Like that, we need to make a statement, which is why the orange economy is considered as something that is very, very integral. Duty-free allowance is increased to 75,000 rupees, and there's a launch of the semiconductor mission, and there's a tax holiday till 2047 for foreign cloud firms who set up their data centers in India. Now, with this, the global finance compliance, there is a 6-month foreign asset disclosure window, and there is also an immunity that we give for who? For movable foreign assets up to 20 lakh from 1st October 2024. In the future, the first one is it is said that we require 2 million professionals, which is why we have created a scheme which will give us 2 million professionals. So we are trying to balance what is given to us and what is going to be the future. The second is the revenue potential is going to be up to 100 million to 125 million dollars. And the third one is the consumer influence. The creators are expected to influence nearly $1 trillion in consumer spending, that is by 2030. So with this, we have come to the end of this topic, and there's a mains practice question. The question is, the orange economy has been described as the IT boom of 21st century for India. Examine the statement with reference to government initiatives and Gen Z employment trends. This is a 15-mark question for 250 words. Please send us across your answer copies so that we can help you aid more in your preparation. And this, let's move to the prelims focus for the day. So now we are going to talk about something that is very, very significant, the deterioration of the India-Bangladeshi ties. And why has this happened and how is this significant is what we're going to see. The first one is the spiral in ties after ousting Sheikh Hasina. Who is Sheikh Hasina? She is one of Bangladesh's longest serving politicians. She served a lot of terms as the Prime Minister. She is also the daughter of Mujibur Rahman, who was the founder of the Bangladeshi state. Now the Bangladesh has come up with tit for tat tactics. What was that? It was the summoning of the high commissioners, and it closed and gave restrictions for visa centers. It also had attacks on the India visa center, which is present in Dhaka, the Indian Cultural Center, which is also present, and the Assistant High Commission, which was in Chittagong. Now the political environment is very, very unstable with the Indian context. Why? Because there is an interim regime in Bangladesh, and the Awami League is also politically marginalized. Now the election period is marked by nationalist tensions, and now because of that, there is an anti-Indian ideology that is going on. Now there is one other classic example of religion-based politics. Now that is why the headline is Bangladesh becoming the new Pakistan. Now India's historical role, it hosted about 10 million refugees, and military interventions was against Pakistan, and they had a cultural linguistic affinity between West Bengal and East Pakistan that is very historically strong, and there was connectivity that was continued till the 1965 war. Now, the narratives in Bangladesh, they are thinking that India is an expansionist, like some colonial power. They portray India as an expansionist, and they are downplaying how much India has helped them during the liberation time. And post Mujibur Rahman's time, the military regime that's cultivated there is an anti-Islamist sentiment, and the historical pattern is that anti-India sentiments increases during the political instability in that particular country. So, the role of Islamist forces, Jamaati Islami, he was historically anti-India. Anti-India rhetoric is amplified through social media campaigns and street mobilizations. And Hasina's presence in India is framed as an Indian interference. Now, again, there is a term called as the Greater Bangla. Now, the Greater Bangla is Bangladesh. It says Bangladesh is greater, and the Siliguri corridor, which is also called as the chicken's neck, is under threat, and the guardianship is there over Bay of Bengal. Bangladesh, Pakistan, and issues are there. Now, statements are advocating of joint pressure over India's northeast region and the convergence of anti-India narrative. Now, what happens? First one, the Siliguri corridor is under security concern, and the cross-border network is very radical, and the northeast insurgency also leads to sensitivity. And the economic and connectivity issues that we see about are BBIN initiative, the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative, the coastal shipping agreements, the energy trade and grid interconnections, the transit routes to the northeast. There are also a lot of multilateral implications. That is, the SARC is stagnated, the BIMSTEC has security concerns, and the Bay of Bengal strategic competition is there in India to China. Now, the T20 World Cup controversy is something that we can talk about. That is, the Bangladesh Cricket Board threatened withdrawal, and Pakistan was also expressing a solidarity towards it. Now, the ICC venue also, they are saying that we will not have a match in Bangladesh, we will not have a match in Pakistan. So, India's response is that it classified Bangladesh as a non-family station. First, it was considered as a family station when Sheikh Hasina was there. Now it's a non-family station because of the security concerns, and there is a diplomatic signaling through MES channels, and sports diplomacy is increasingly politicalized. Now let's see what are the similarities between Bangladesh and Pakistan and the differences. One, the use of anti-national sentiment for electoral gains. Two is Islamist political mobilization, and three is security rhetorical targeting. And the difference is this: no military dominance like Pakistan, deep economic interdependence with India, and trade and energy dependence is also significant. The conclusion is that Bangladesh is not structurally Pakistan. However, rhetorical hostility and anti-Indianism is resembling, it's not will, it is resembling the Pakistani patterns. Now we have to focus on diplomacy to avoid overreaction, to deepen people to people engagement, to strengthen economic interdependence, and engage in political stakeholders. With this, we come to the main practice question of the day, which is the rise of anti-Indianism. Bangladesh reflects both domestic political churn and regional geopolitical shifts, critically analyze the changing trajectory of India-Bangladesh relations in the post-2024 period. So with this, we come to the end of this topic and we are moving to the next topic for the day. So we've come to the prelims focus for the day. So the first topic is World Cancer Day. It's observed annually on February 4th, and who launches it? Launched by the Union for International Cancer Control, UICC. First, when was it observed? In 2000, during the World Summit Against Cancer for the New Millennium. You can remember this new millennium as a key. New millennium in Paris. The team is united by unique, and the objective is to raise awareness about cancer and its consequences in individuals, families, and communities. So next is about the Grand Kutir. The Grand Kutir. The President of India has inaugurated the Granth Kutir at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So what is it? It has a house storage of 2,300 manuscripts and books. It covers 11 classical languages. So what is the classical language? Pristine languages. No unadulterated form. It is completely unadulterated, not in adulterated form. So Tamil, Sanskrit, Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, Odia, Marathi, Pali, Prakrit, Assamese, and Bengali. You have to give additional focus on the name of the language. So if they give another classical language, you should not be confused here. It replaces the collections of Lord Curzon and works of William Hogarth. It is integrated with the Gyan Bharati mission for preservation, digitization, and dissemination. Its objective also is to enhance public awareness on cultural and literary heritage. Next is about the rescue and road restoration operation under Project Sampark. So, what does Project Sampark say? First, it's held at the Chatargala Pass. Where is the Chatargala Pass? In the Jammu region and in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Carried out by the BRO, the Border Road Organization, and the causes is because it was disrupted due to heavy snowfall, and the significance is it reaffirms the motto Shramana Sarvam Satyam. Now, we've come to the prelims practice question for the day. With reference to the World Cancer Day, consider the following statements. It was launched by the Union for International Cancer Control, yes. It was first observed during the World Summit Against Cancer for the New Millennium. We already mentioned that this is something that we should remember. And yes, it was in Paris in 2000. The theme for World Cancer Day 2026 is United by Unique. So the answer should be 1, 2 and 3 are right. Yes, it's option D. So it is 1, 2 and 3. All the 3 statements are right. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit on the bell icon to receive instant updates. And thank you for watching our video.